All right, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. First, let me acknowledge that the last video, I had a terrible problem with audio. I think it's still intelligible. It's just that there's an annoying echo throughout the whole video. Please comment if you'd like me to do that video over again, keeping in mind that, as you probably already know, I don't script any of this. This is all live as I read and think about the Buddhist teachings. I want to give you my most honest, I guess, if we want to talk about it that way, my most honest thoughts directly from my practice, my daily practice, and upon reading and rereading these Gosho, I just want to give you my, what's the word I'm looking for? Instantaneous response, my most genuine response. So that means my videos can sometimes wander a little bit. I understand, that's the way I am, but ergo the honesty part. There's no prepared script. I just want to talk about Buddhism and make it clear. And there may be some times when I talk about the same subject throughout my channel, and I'll offer a different take on it. But that's by design, because I'm telling you from the depth of my 40 plus years of study, my understanding as I'm reading it and conveying it to you. So all of that is to say that previous video, the part 4 of Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra Gosho, was just ad hoc, instantaneous, and if you can't understand what I'm saying, then I have to re-record it. But if you can tolerate that one video, I think this one will be an example of better audio, a better grasp of the equipment I'm working with here. It's my own foibles. But this one should have a marked improvement in sound, audio. And if we can just move on and leave that one as it is, a document in its own right, then I'm perfectly happy with that. But I'm not happy with that if you're afraid to let me know, or for whatever reason holding back, that you just can't tolerate or understand what I'm saying in the previous video, then it's of no use. So please let me know. With that, part 5 of the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra. And as you can see, I'm opening the book, and we're going to go live. So here we go. Myo means to revive, that is, to return to life. For example, it is said that though the chick of a yellow crane may die, if the mother crane calls the name of Tsuan, then the dead chick will come back to life. Or, in the case of the fish and the shellfish that have been killed because a poisonous bird called a chen has entered the water, it is said that if they are touched with a rhinoceros horn, they will all be brought back to life. Similarly, persons of the two vehicles, Ichantikas and women, were described in the sutras that preceded the Lotus Sutra as having scorched and killed the seeds that would have allowed them to become Buddhas. But by holding fast to this single character, Myo, they can revive these scorched seeds of Buddhahood. Now, again, these are expedient means, but you understand that there's the human life. There's the human life impeded by I was going to say improper, but that suggests some kind of etiquette. Just unenlightened thinking, attached worldview of being self, ego, attachments, thingness, material, right? That leads us through all kinds of suffering. And then there is this concept, myo, that includes all of the teachings of Buddha, and in the Lotus Sutra is manifest in its full and therefore captured in the Daimoku, which releases us, liberates us from that walled off human mind, human thinking, human thought, and clears a path through that. I think I used a cornfield as an analogy many years ago. Well, this will work here. This is exactly, let me give you a more contemporary version of what Nichiren here is saying, because he's using stories and folklore and examples of the day and the days previous to him that are well known in his society. So here in the United States, North America, we're all familiar with cornfields, and they grow very tall and very dense, and they're very hard to see through. And so if you can imagine, this is life. This is life is walking through a cornfield and being surrounded by all this corn, all these corn stalks, and you can't see where you're going, and you don't really know where you've been. You have an idea, you maybe search it out. It's like a maze that you can't find your way through, right? That's life, regular, mortal, samsaric human life. And then with the Daimoku specifically here is talking about myo. The meaning of myo specifically is an opening, a return to the essence of life, not this conditioned cornfield of obstacles. Do you see? So when you finally get to the edge of the cornfield, you may not know which edge, but when you come free of the corn stalks, there's a bright blue sky, maybe cute clouds and a nice warm day, and you see clearly across the open fields. This is awakening. And myo provides that path to you now experiencing your life essentially, deeply, fundamentally, without the obstacles of the cornfield. So hopefully that helps. I like that analogy, so you tell me if it helps you. All right. Tendai says, quote, the Ichantikas, or persons of incorrigible disbelief, nevertheless have minds, and so it is still possible for them to attain Buddhahood. That's what I'm just saying. But persons of the two vehicles have annihilated consciousness, and therefore cannot arouse the mind that aspires to enlightenment. That's very important. This is why they're stalled. This is why they're stuck. This is why practice to the point of arhat is inadequate. It's not complete enlightenment. All right? Because you're staying in your head. You're staying in your mind. You're not seeing beyond your mind. The Buddha mind sees beyond the self, the ego. The human mind is all about the human being, whereas the Buddha mind is about seeing far, far deeper and through and around that human mind. It ceases to be one individual amongst everything else. It includes everything else manifest in the individual. It's very different. It's a different kind of clarity. It's a different kind of place in the world. It's a different kind of worldview, that you are not a player in it, but just like the universe, it is within you. You remember my example of the universe being like a drop of food coloring into a vast body of water? That the universe doesn't stay into one local, self-absorbed thing. That the universe actually is expanding into and dissipating throughout, and therefore at some point becomes less in and more of this body of water. They cease to be separate. This is the concept of oneness, often alluded to by many types of schools, teachers, and practices. But I want you to understand it here as the Buddha mind. It transcends this self, this body, this person, this ego, right? This is what awakening is about. So let's continue. It's contained in this translation, this sentence here, where Tendai says, "But persons of the two vehicles, learning and realization, have annihilated consciousness." He's taking consciousness beyond the self, and therefore cannot arouse the mind that aspires to enlightenment, because it is our human mind which is capable of aspiring, of making causes, of making effort to open our Buddha mind. If we shut down our human mind, see, a lot of people misunderstand that that's what Buddhism is about. We're not trying to end the human mind. We're trying to use the very nature of the human mind, its avarice and its parsing and its labeling and its identification of things, and use that hugely powerful instrument that we have in samsara to see beyond itself to the Buddha mind. So we can't just see the Buddha mind. It's not like we flip a switch on the wall. We use our human mind to get there. This is what Nichiren talks about when he talks about earthly desires are enlightenment. He's use that tremendous force of mind and direct it to your Buddha nature. Go to Gohanzen, chant. This is the quickest way to pound down that door, open those windows, get to the edge of the cornfield. Okay? And yet the Lotus Sutra can cure them, which is why it is called Myo, or wonderful. I hope by now you're starting to see that this character, Myo, isn't about a word. It's not about a magic word. It's not even about the chant so much as the chant is using our human mind to see beyond the limitations of our human mind to our Buddha mind. This is Myo. Miao Lo says, quote, "The reason that the other sutras are all called great but not Myo is simply that it is easy to cure those who have a mind, but difficult to cure those who are without a mind." There it is again. Now that sounds very odd when you read it without knowledge, but when you start to understand that the mind they're speaking of is our human mind, this is why you can only attain Buddhahood, enlightenment, while you're in this form, while you're in this life. So a lot is made about that in many groups discussing enlightenment is possible in this very lifetime. And so that statement juxtaposes enlightenment and awakening against an after-death experience. But there is no after-death experience in actual Buddhism. See, that's why the Lotus Sutra created such a monstrous wave when he taught it. Because it took the whole idea of an afterlife, of reincarnation, of multiple lifetimes, all of that, and said, stop being mystical, stop kidding your human mind and toying in this fantasy that you've got this other option after you leave this body. All of it is here and now. All of it. All of your enlightenment, all of your Buddha mind, all of your perception. In order to experience the Buddha mind, you have to be able to perceive it. And you can't perceive it when you're dust. You can only perceive your enlightenment while you're in human form. It all happens here and now. That is the great thing. That is the tremendous revolution of Buddhism, real Buddhism, the foundation of Buddhism, the enlightenment of Shakyamuni himself. Because it, the Lotus Sutra, can cure what is thought to be incurable, it is called Myo, or wonderful. Sadam Pudarika Sutram, right? Sadam. Sad meaning wonderful. The wonderful teaching of the white lotus flower, or of the lotus flower, right? These passages refer to the fact that sutras such as the Great and Vast Buddha Flower Garland Sutra, or the Kigan Sutra, the Great Collection Sutra, the Great Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, and the Great Nirvana Sutra all have the character great in their titles, but not the character myo, or wonderful. This is because they can only cure the living, but are unable to cure the dead. The dead not being after. See, this is a Western translation, so it leads you to believe, oh, see, once you're dead, that's when these options become available to you. No, what he's calling dead is a human existence in the cornfield, unable to see beyond its own condition at that moment. That's dead. Because in the next moment, you have a choice. Do you continue to feel surrounded and oppressed and suffering through your existence? Or do you move forward? Do you move through the corn? Do you know in your mind you have a picture of clear skies and clear fields and freedom of movement and complete perception of your life? See, one is alive and one is essentially dead. It's a choice you make each and every moment. And I've talked about this before in videos on birth and death, because each moment is a new birth. That birth is of every cause, karma, nidanic chain that has come before it, and it's transferred into the new moment. You have an option in each and every moment of your life to influence that, to move it in a direction that takes you to liberation, optimal existence, right? Life and death. The Lotus Sutra, however, can cure the dead as well as the living. We're not talking about zombies here. We're talking about your ongoing existence as a human being. And therefore, it has the character Myo in its title, Myoho Renge Kyo. Thus, with the other sutras, persons who should by rights become Buddhas cannot do so. But the Lotus Sutra, even those who would ordinarily find it impossible to do so can attain Buddhahood. Not to mention those for whom it is relatively easy. This being the case, in the time since the Lotus Sutra was preached, there ought not to be a single person who adheres to the other sutras. So, it's not that you shouldn't read the other sutras or study the other sutras, because only through doing that will you fully comprehend the immensity and the beauty of the Lotus Sutra. But the important word here is adheres to. So if you read an early sutra and you base your entire Buddhist practice on what you've gained out of that reading, you will not have completely understood Buddhism and you'll be missing the mark. You will not achieve full and complete awakening, enlightenment, Buddhahood. Now, the 2,000 years of the former and middle days of the law have passed, and we have entered the latter day of the law. In such an age, it is 100,000, 10,000, million times more difficult for ordinary people to attain Buddhahood or rebirth in the Pure Land than it is for even the person of the two vehicles or Chantikas who lived when the Buddha was alive. And yet people nowadays think that by relying on the Meditation Sutra or some other of the sutras preached in the more than 40 years before the Lotus Sutra, they can escape the sufferings of birth and death. How futile, how utterly futile. Women, whether they live at the time of the Buddha or in the former, middle, or latter day of the law, cannot attain Buddhahood through any teaching but the Lotus Sutra. None of the other sutras expounded by any of the Buddhas anywhere can help them. The great teacher Tendai Chiche, who heard the Buddha's teachings at Eagle Peak and later attained awakening in the place of meditation, has stated unequivocally, the other sutras predict Buddhahood for men, but not for women. This sutra predicts Buddhahood for all. Thus come one Shakyamuni, in the presence of many treasures Buddha, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions, preached the Lotus Sutra over a period of 8 years at the place called Eagle Peak, northeast of Rajagriha, in the kingdom of Magadha. The great teacher Tendai Chiche was present and heard him preach. Quote, "During my 50 years of teaching," end quote, said the Buddha, quote, "I have preached various sacred doctrines, all in order to bring benefit to living beings. In the sutras of the first 42 years, I taught that it was not possible for women to attain Buddhahood. But now, with the Lotus Sutra, I declare that women can become Buddhas," end quote. Northeast of Eagle Peak, at a distance of some 108,000 ri beyond the mountains and seas, there is a country called Mahachina in Sanskrit. We know it as China. Some 1,500 years after the Buddha's passing, there appeared in this country a messenger of the Buddha called the great teacher Tendai Chiche, who declared that women could never attain Buddhahood through any teachings other than the Lotus Sutra. 3,000 ri to the east of China, there is a country called Japan. I think that's west. Anyway, I'm thinking, sorry, map. Some 200 years after the great teacher Tendai passed away, he was reborn in this country and bore the name of the great teacher Dengyo. He then wrote a work entitled The Outstanding Principles of the Lotus Sutra, in which he stated, quote, "Neither teacher nor disciples need undergo countless kalpas of austere practices in order to attain Buddhahood. Through the power of the Lotus Sutra of the wonderful law, they can do so in their present form," end quote. Thus he made clear why the Dragon King's daughter was able to become a Buddha. This is related to what I said earlier about there's no afterlife and no multiple lifetimes and all these kalpas, because that was used as a huge call to unknowable effort by women who had, in early sutras, had to live through some 16 million kalpas or who knows how many lifetimes in order to be able to become Buddhas. But now, as we approach the Lotus Sutra, and in the Lotus Sutra we learn that lifetimes are moments. Our entire lifetime is transferred from one moment to the next. So it simply means that there's an arduous resolve that needs to be made in order to attain Buddhahood. And what really happens in the Lotus Sutra is not so much that women can suddenly become enlightened, but that it's made clear that the effort that you and I, women and men, must make the same level of arduous commitment and resolve in order to get out of the middle of this cornfield and get to the light, get to our maximal potential and expression of life. Okay? It may seem somewhat difficult for women of the age we live in to attain Buddhahood in their present form, but if they put their trust in the Lotus Sutra, there is no doubt that they will be reborn in the pure land of perfect bliss. So what's the pure land of perfect bliss? It's not a place like heaven or hell or Cincinnati. The pure land of perfect bliss is in the mind. It's the Buddha mind. Make sense? They will reach it more readily than the rivers and streams flowing into the great ocean, or more swiftly than the rain falling from the sky. And yet, we find that the women throughout Japan do not chant Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Instead, they put their resolute mind of determination in works such as the 2-volume sutra or the meditation sutra, which can never lead women to the Pure Land or to Buddhahood. And this is lamentable. This is like they don't go beyond those. They adhere to those sutras, so they limit their understanding of their own enlightenment as being out of their reach. This is where Buddhism can resemble the religions of the world. Everything will be yours after you die. Well, that's a very convenient motto, isn't it? You can't be proved wrong. But Buddhism can. I dare you to prove it wrong. Practice it correctly with the Lotus Sutra in mind. Chant the Daimoku, get a Gohanzan, and practice and read and study and really dedicate yourself to it. And it won't take very long. You'll get your own proof. You don't need anyone to tell you. They intone the name of the Buddha Amida 60,000 or 100,000 times a day. Amida is indeed the name of a Buddha, but remember, all Buddhas are emanations of Shakyamuni. Mental exercises, inventions, expedient means. And to invoke it would seem to be a laudable practice. But because the women who do so are relying upon sutras that have never led women to Buddhahood, or to rebirth in the Pure Land, they are in effect merely counting other people's riches. This comes about solely because they are led astray by evil teachers. In case you don't understand that counting other people's riches thing, that's a reference to an old folk tale, and you know, the shorthand of it today would be that no matter how, if you work in a bank and you're an accountant, and your job and your basic skill in life is to read through and organize and count other people's money, right? But simply by counting that money doesn't make you a millionaire. Just counting it doesn't do anything for you, except it enriches your skill of counting, maybe. So this is what that's about. You can practice and chant Amida, Buddha's name, all day long, but you're chanting a fallacy. You're chanting about a mystical character, an emanation of Buddha that was an example to help teach and for you to learn and go beyond. So if that's all you chant, then you're not getting anywhere. You're just counting the same thing over and over again. It's like walking in circles in the cornfield. You don't have the objective of getting out. The Pure Land of Amida Buddha is a land within the human experience. The Pure Land of Buddhahood is your enlightenment. You are free of all of those attachments, including Amida Buddha. All the women of Japan face an enemy more fearful than tigers or wolves, mountain bandits or pirates at sea, their parents as foes or their husbands as concubines. Their real enemies are those who, instead of teaching them the Lotus Sutra, teach them the Nembutsu. The Nembutsu is the name of Amida Buddha. Only after chanting Namo Myoho Renge Kyo 60,000, 100,000, or even 10 million times a day may women who put their resolute mind of determination in the Lotus Sutra, if they still have some time to spare, now and then murmur to themselves the name of Amida or one of the other Buddhas. But women these days spend their whole lives constantly reciting the name of Amida and busying themselves with matters concerning the Nembutsu. They never recite the Lotus Sutra or give alms for its sake. True, there are a few who have the Lotus Sutra read by those who uphold its teachings, but they look up to the Nembutsu priests as though they were their parents or brothers, and treat the upholders of the Lotus Sutra with less respect than they would their retainers or followers. And yet they claim that they are believers in the Lotus Sutra. By contrast, Lady Pure Virtue gave permission for her sons, the two princes, to enter the Buddhist order and encouraged them to propagate the Lotus Sutra. Moreover, the Dragon King's daughter took a vow, saying, quote, I unfold the doctrines of the great vehicle to rescue living beings from suffering, end quote. These women surely took no vow to practice only the teachings of the other sutras and to neglect the practice of the Lotus Sutra. Nevertheless, that is what the women of today do, paying all their attention to the practice of other sutras and none to that of the Lotus Sutra. You must reform your thinking immediately. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. So this letter was written for a woman of advanced years. Nothing is known about her other than she was a new believer in Nichiren Shonen's Buddhism and lived in Amatsu of Awa province. This letter explains in plain terms the rewards of the simple practice of Namu Myoho Renge Kyo by saying that this phrase and its components contain all the powers of the Buddha, and that one who chants it can tap all the benefits of Buddhism and thus revitalize one's life. So, I'll let you do your own research beyond that. There's a lot of information in here and notes and so forth. So, although the title of this Gosho is specifically the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, it in fact he does talk about the complete Daimoku, Daimoku, but he spends a lot of time on the first character, Myo. But, even to just do this, this Gosho really explores the significance of the center of the Gohanzen, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, and how there's just a vast amount of knowledge and experience to be had in the study of all of these characters and what they truly represent. Okay? So, thank you for watching. Hopefully the audio came out as expected on this. I won't really know until I listen to it back. But thank you. Thank you for your allegiance and your patience with me and your practice. Always put your practice first. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you so much. Bye. I gotta get used to